So if you've decided to take the red pill, reference to the Matrix there. If you don't know, if I don't know, if you do, you do. So what we're going to do is we're going to start this journey into Unity and give you a little bit more of an insight into what's happening in a mesh. And let's look at the components and what makes up a mesh. So inside of Unity, and you can open up your Unity as well, and you can click through yours and look at these on your own while I'm doing this. So we're in Unity, and looking around here, I'm just randomly picking a mesh. And you could do this for any mesh. You could pick a bunker, although they're a little bit more complex, okay? So you might want to pick something like a fairway or green. So I'm going to pick this green right here, and we're going to take a look at it. And we have the inspector up over here. And in the inspector, we've got various components, and those components make up the mesh. Okay, they give it the characteristics and make it what it is. So at the very top here, and this will be in every single thing that you have in your product, whether it's a mesh or tree, something else, you'll have this top section here. And it lots of attributes up here, but the one main thing you need to be concerned with is this checkbox, which essentially disables this. So anytime you have an object in your scene, you can easily turn it off. It's really good for troubleshooting by just hitting that checkbox and turn things on and off. The next thing down here, which is also going to be present in just about any object that is in your scene, is its transform. The transform is nothing more than manipulating its location. Okay, so this has a location, okay, in XYZ space, but we can move it out of its location. So if I hit X, you can see it goes to the side, and then Y goes up and down. Okay, and then Z moves the other direction. We've got rotation, we've got scale. For the most part, with our meshes, we never really want to touch these, okay? Because if we move these, if we move this one to the side, we now have a gap here, and the ball is going to fall through there, okay? So we really don't want to touch these with our meshes. Other things, yes, perhaps. Now, the next thing we have here is our spline. So the spline, if you recall, is the shape, okay, of a object. It's like its wrapper, okay? In this case, it is, if I click on this, you can see that it takes us to our FBX folder. This should sound familiar to you. We created this FBX folder, and what do we put in it? Well, we imported all of our FBXs that we created in Blender, all right? And in this case, we have our green mesh, and underneath there, we have this specific, okay, mesh. It is this shape, and you can see when I click on this, I get some attributes over here. So it's telling me, hey, this has a 1,161 verts, 2,164 tries. So this green is using this mesh, okay, as its shape. Okay, simple way of performing, of saying it. Now, the next thing down here, the next component, is this mesh renderer. So let me turn this off, because you're going to see if I turn this off what it's actually doing. So if I turn this off, what's left? We've got all our vertices, we've got our lines, and we have our triangles. That's all that's left. Why? Well, because when the mesh renderer fills in all these faces with the material. What's that material? Well, it's this OPCD Moss Green Lush. I know we haven't got much into materials yet. We will, trust me. Let's turn that back on. So when I turn on the mesh renderer, it is filling those triangles, those faces, with this material. Okay, I'm keeping things high level at this point, baby steps, right? So if I minimize that, it cleans things up a little bit so you guys can see. Now, the next thing is this show vertex colors script. Now, this is a specific OPCD script developed by one of the big three. I think it was probably John that wrote this. It could have been DPR. I'm not sure which one. But this is a specific OPCD capability that was added to Unity. Unity is very extensible. And if I click on this show vertex painting, you're going to see what happens here. And this should look familiar to you as well. It's all red. Well, remember we talked about channels? We have 4 channels available to us. We have red, blue, green, and black, right? This is showing us the channels that are assigned to this mesh. In this case is all red. This one is all red. And I can hide that and I can get back to the material. And you can see when I do this, I go back and forth here. that this is all red from end to end. And we'll get into vertex painting a little bit. Actually, we'll talk about it here in a second, actually right now. I can also click on this Open Vertex Painter. And now we'll get a little pop-up here of our vertex painter. Remember when I talked about we can do vertex painting in Blender and we can do vertex painting in Unity. I said Blender is more procedural and Unity is more artistic. Well, here we are. This is the vertex painting, and this is how we start to paint our different materials or different things on top of our meshes. We're going to come back to that. This is going to have its own video, so I'm just going to close this out. Okay, so that's this show vertex color section. We also have our mesh channel materials store. We call this our scripted objects. This one gets a little bit tricky, and we're going to explain this more later on. But really, this is just a script that holds the information on what is assigned to the various channels in this particular mesh. And you can see all the red, blue, green, black channels hold the same green lush material. Okay, so here it is, this theme, the MHS green lush. It's assigned all these. In a nutshell, what happens is these can be referenced later on, not even later on, by, for example, blends. So you can create new blends, but if you create a blend, you need to know what's contained in the meshes that that blend is connecting. So if you have a blend going from green to fairway, that blend needs some way of going out and finding out, okay, if you want me to blend these things together, what materials do I need to blend? So normally you're not going to touch this, and we'll get into a more an advanced topic on what these are doing later on when we talk about blends and creating blends. But for now, I just want you to know this component exists, okay? Then we have our Mesh Collider. Now, Mesh Collider is not specific to OPCD tools. This is more of a Unity function. And what it's doing is it's taking our physics, in this case, our green physics. Remember, physics are how a ball reacts. So when a ball hits this, how is it going to interact with this material or this mesh? In this case, it's the green physics. Okay, so here are all our physics when I click on that. And that green physics is applied to what? Well, it's applying to that mesh shape we talked about earlier, right? So pretty simple here, but if you wanted to change this to something else other than green, remember I said you had that flexibility. Yeah, you could click on this and I just changed it to rough. Now, if a ball lands on there, it's gonna behave like it's on rough. So that's pretty simple. And I think I referenced this earlier, but leaves and wood are reserved for trees only. Do not use leaves and do not use wood for anything but trees. That's in a later section. So let me change this back to green and we're all set. The next thing here is this vertex instance stream. And we're going to cover this a little bit more later on, but the idea behind the vertex instance stream is twofold. One is if you bring in and you, let's say, make some changes in Blender, or you go back in Inkscape, you make some changes, and then you re-import a mesh in here, and it's a new FBX. You can use this to make sure that we assign and update the painting, our vertex painting, and our to that mesh after we make those changes. So this is what this would do. We'd update paint. We'll cover this later on, and then bake vertex painting to mesh. Cover this later on as well. It's just the way of taking our vertex painting and moving it, okay, onto the mesh itself instead of it being scripted, so that we can do some things with 3DG. More on that again later on. Add palette, honestly, it's not something you're going to ever touch. I've never touched it, and honestly, I couldn't even tell you what this does at this point. And then lastly here we have our shader, and we're going to talk a lot more about shaders most likely in a very soon video. I'm going to have to give you guys some more education on what shaders are, but if I expand this, we got a lot of stuff here, okay? And specifically, this shader was designed specifically for by the OPCD authors, specifically for use inside of Unity, and there's a lot going on here. Way too much for this video. We'll probably cover a lot of this stuff in a subsequent video, but the bottom line is this is where we can select what shader we're using. You can see there are lots of different shaders used inside of this tool, okay? Let me just show you one thing here. Now, So if you're going to see here what's essentially happening, this is a good idea of differences between shaders. So when I come up here and I hit show vertex painting, come and minimize this, watch what happens to my shader. Show vertex painting. All it really does is it changes, okay, what shader is being shown on here, and it changes it to this hidden vertex painter pro preview, which is a shader that shows the vertex painting. And then when I hide it, it goes back to the OPCD 4-color vert paint MAHS shader. So that's really what's happening here. It just makes it much more convenient to do it here instead of having to go, for example, if I do show vertex painting, uh, instead of having to go here and go to, where's it at? Hidden. Oh, it's hidden because it's essentially hidden. Tricky, tricky. But in other words, if you want to change, I could switch this back to OPCD by going here, here. Now you can see, whoops, that's not good. So let's do hide vertex, show vertex, and that at least brings it back. So you always want to do it here. Don't try to do what I did. All right. That's it for this video.